Hello, hello, everyone, once again, and welcome back to Memoirs of the Father. I am your host, the Father, Alex Burnham. How is everybody doing now after we just got to experience UCA College Nationals? It was absolutely outstanding. The amount of people that came out and just executed and delivered. This is one of the best nationals in a lot of divisions that I've seen in a very, very long time. It might be up there with one of the best of all time when you look at their performances, the consistency. There were a lot of teams that delivered, especially at the very, very top of those results sheets, that really went out there and did their job, and they were absolutely fantastic. I started my week going into this battling some sickness. I got sick on Thursday night, was feeling terrible. I had the chills, cold sweats, fever, everything, and I suffered through to get through the first couple days of this. But cheerleading is a very exciting thing, and I was so very excited to watch it, so very excited to take a part in that. And then, of course, I had several kids that were competing this weekend, and we'll talk about how all of them did. But I want to talk about UCA Nationals. I want to look at how some of these things broke down, and just kind of really try to dig into that and see what I saw. I don't have score sheets. I never have the score sheets. So everything that I'm saying is just going to be my opinion. What I would think of it as a judge, what I thought of it as a spectator. And that's just kind of how, don't take any of it too personal. I just kind of want to break this down and look at this because this was super, super exciting. It's going to be fun to talk about because I have a lot of questions. I'm sure a lot of people have lots of questions. But for the most part, I feel pretty comfortable that they got a lot of these things right. There were a lot of interesting things, a lot of interesting stories that developed throughout this week that really, really changed things and really threw a wrench in some great comeback performances. Some people coming back from some rough preliminary rounds and coming out and doing some outstanding things. If you guys don't want to waste any more time, I know that I don't. Let's go ahead and let's jump into looking at this. So first things first, I don't watch game day. I'm not going to talk about game day. I didn't watch it. I watched the University of Kentucky because I had Joseph and Audrey on that team. You guys did great. Absolutely proud of you guys. So, I watched them, and then I watched Morehead State because I had Izzy and Haley on those teams. Those are the only teams that I really watched. I'm not a game day guy. It doesn't excite me. After sitting there and watching some of those routines, after a while it just kind of all bleeds together for me. I won't waste a lot of time on that. I really didn't get to watch a couple of other divisions. Things were kind of going back and forth and staggering a little bit. So I did not watch Small Coed D1A. I didn't really get to watch a lot of the D1A all-girl finals either. And it's just because my kids were competing in the other division at the same time that the finals was going on. I did catch the final three. I caught Ole Miss and I caught Alabama. What happened there was pretty easy. I thought Alabama had the chance to win this 100%. It was Alabama's in the bag. Ole Miss came out and had an absolutely outstanding performance. The difficulty wasn't the same. Alabama did have the better routine, but Ole Miss had the better performance. And they did really, really well. They were catching their skills at the top. There was no bent arms, no bent legs. Feet weren't moving. Pyramids were landing in the pockets. And those are things that we're going to talk about a lot throughout the course of this and how these affected score sheets and the way that people viewed these routines. But hats off to Ole Miss. I know they've been going through a lot for several years, so I'm sure to finally have a national championship in a traditional division is through the roof for them. Absolutely congratulations. Tough luck for the University of Alabama. Obviously they're going to bounce back. They traditionally are one of these top teams. They're an absolutely outstanding program, and it just one little thing happened, and that's the difference. Sometimes it has not taking anything away from them. What they tried to do was extremely difficult, and that's just what happens sometimes. So, but we're going to start off with the Open Coed division, not the small one, not the all-girl one, Open Coed. This featured Shelton State, Iowa Western, Jones, and I believe it was Indian Hills. Now I watched the preliminary rounds, and coming out of this, I've got my sheet here, so if you hear some paper rattling, that's what it is. Shelton State was in third place with a score of 78.1. The raw score was 82-1. They had 4 points of deductions. Iowa Western had an 83.7 raw, 4 points in deductions, put them at a 79.7. And then Jones was in first with an 86.8, one deduction, and their final score for that round was an 85.8. I have Ethan and Landon are at Jones, and then I have Clark at Iowa Western. And I don't have any boys on Shelton currently, but Shelton is a program that's very, very dear and near to me. They have taken care of several of my guys and done a fantastic job of helping develop them, helping them teach them the things that they're supposed to do, helping them transfer on to other programs. Because a lot of people that come to these three colleges specifically, they go there for a couple years, 2, maybe 3, and then they transfer out. And a lot of them, they know that's what it is, because a lot of these big schools are looking at them like, you get some people in that you know are comfortable with certain skills, that you know have competition experience, that you know understand kind of what it's going to be like to go through the process of getting ready for collegiate level nationals. Battle tested and prepared. A lot of these kids are going to be looking to make jumps in the future, and a lot of my kids that have gone through, they did their time at Shelton and moved on. And like I said, I can't think enough about Shelton and Brittany Morris when she was there, and all that she's done for my kids, all that they've done for me. I mean, they made a direct impact on the changes that I was able to make at the difficulty level. And without them, none of that would be possible. Absolutely outstanding program. Shelton has got some new coaches this year who are fantastic. I met them once when they were working on like their Team USA partner stunt, and this has been a couple years ago. But I think her name is Bethany, and she's there now, and she's the coach. I think her husband's with her. Fantastic, fantastic people. Obviously, when we look at what finals and what went down here, we're going to see that they're obviously on to something. So the final score ended up being, because only there's 3 teams made it into finals. Jones had a rough go. They had at least a pyramid fall, like collapse. That was probably a 3-point hit right there. They had a stunt drop, so that was another 1-point hit there. So there's 4-point deductions. Their raw score was an 85.9, which was obviously down from the day before. It should be. With mistakes like that, it's going to affect your execution. It's going to affect your overall view of how your routine went. It's going to affect crowd energy. All that stuff. Drops kind of hurt you across the board because it affects every single thing you do. I understand that there's only one section that's judging that, but it impacts the flow and the chemistry of your routine. So your scores are going to be lower. Their final score ended up being an 81.9. I am sure that they're very disappointed in that. This is a team that's won 3 of the last 4 national championships in that division. And then we had Iowa Western came in second with an 86.4, no deductions. And then Sheldon State had an 88.2, no deductions, which is a big jump up from 78.1 the day before. So what was the difference? Well, Sheldon had an outstanding performance. And if you want to go back and you want to look at this, this was outstanding from top to bottom. They executed well. They're catching their stunts at the top. There's no coming down to the chest. There's no bent elbows. These stunts are making connection at the top. They look very comfortable. They look in control of everything that they're doing. You look at the pyramids, everything's landing in the pockets. We probably won't talk a whole lot about cheers throughout the course of this because these cheers are pretty close in score. I don't think anybody's blowing anybody out of the water in cheer in these college divisions unless mistakes and stuff like that are happening. But Shelton really came out there and had a great performance. And if I'm being honest, when I look at this, I think Shelton, if you just look at the routine perspective, I think of the 3 routines that made it to finals, I thought that they had the weakest routine. But they had the best execution, and it was not close, in my opinion. I mean, they beat Iowa Western by about 2 points. I mean, it was 1.8. But, I mean, if you go back and you compare the two, you'll be able to see it. The way that the guys from Shelton are connecting at the tops of their stunts, the timing on their dismounts, with Iowa Western, a lot of the catches, feet aren't together or it's a little bit of juggling, a little bit of balance and stuff like that. And, I mean, all that stuff ultimately added up. I think this was a story of execution, and I think when it comes to these 3 teams, that's always going to be the story. Whoever executes the best is the one that's going to walk away with it. And that's always going to – they're very similar in difficulty. Very, very similar across the board. I don't know if anyone had a clear-cut advantage. Probably Jones would probably be the closest with, they had the front pop. They had the front handspring up. They had really, really good skills. Rewinds, I believe. Jones had the difficulty edge. They just didn't execute. They had a bad day. That happens, and it's very unfortunate. This year, for them, finals was really, really early in the morning. That has an effect and stuff like that. There were some things that were different, and it's going to be different a lot more going forward. They're going to rewrite and rechange these things. Things are going to be at different times. It's going to be to make it more unbalanced. It's going to be to make it a little bit more unpredictable, to put you in different situations. But hats off to Shelton State. Absolutely outstanding performance. Unfortunately, none of my boys ended up getting a win here. But I'm super proud of Ethan and Clark and Landon. All three of you guys did an outstanding job. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of what you represented. Clark threw a standing tuck. And let me tell you something. I personally watched this kid break his foot getting spotted by 2 UCA staff members at a camp trying to throw a standing tuck his first year. And then he'd I hardly ever seen him work on it again after that. So to see him come out there and have a standing tuck and to do his job, and for everything that kid has been through the last few years, I haven't seen him. The last time I seen him, he came and visited me around Christmas, and that was, God, a little over 2 years ago. And he was just having a rough go at the time. And to be able to sit here now and see him to do all that and achieve. Same thing for Landon and Ethan. I didn't get to coach Ethan for very long, but I always liked Ethan. He was always funny. He always listened to me. And he was really, when I left there, he was really starting to come into his own and really starting to branch out. And he's done incredible. I've seen videos of him. And of course, Landon has just plateaued beyond so many levels. I hope to have all three of these guys on at some point to talk to them about their story and what they've gone through and their experiences in college and in high school cheer. So that's something I would like to do. I just got to get around to reaching all at them, and then they all got to get home to sit down and talk with me at some point. So, but this was a really good division. Like I said, the top 2 teams hit, Shelton and Iowa Western, and it just came down to a story of execution. Whew, buddy. And the story for the next 3 divisions is going to be very, very simple. West Georgia versus Morehead State. Probably the biggest and most competitive rivalry that expands multiple divisions at UCA Nationals. This is insane. The all-girl have been going at it for a while, and then a couple years back they switched and made the co-ed teams compete with each other. And then I think last year was Morehead's first year with the small co-ed team, I believe, and then West Georgia decided they were going to have a small co-ed team this year. So these teams are squaring off in 3 different divisions. Let's start with the Small Coed Division 1. I'm just going to do the top 3 here. There were a lot of pretty decent teams in this, obviously. But when you get someone like West Georgia and you get someone like Morehead, they've got pedigree and they've got the ability to recruit, the ability to do some really crazy things, man. It's hard to hang up with there. But there was Southeastern Louisiana came in 3rd place in semis. They had an 88.9. I watched the routine for finals, and I thought, man, this is a really good routine. And it stayed the same for them. They got 3rd place in finals as well. They scored a 91.5 raw. They had a 1-point deduction and ended up with a 90.5, which is really, really good. And I was sitting there thinking, I was like, man, this team is pretty impressive. They did a really great job. They look significantly better than LSU. And they're in the same state. And it's one of those things. This is a team that's been climbing and fighting. They've been pushing and been at the door for a while now. They were having some battles with Eastern during COVID. They continued their momentum from there. And this is a program that's really growing, and I hope that they continue to, because the more competition, the better. And the more high-quality teams, the more prestige it adds to these championships and stuff like that. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, because I definitely think that there's too many divisions in cheerleading. And when we get to talk about some of these scores here in a second, I don't understand why we don't just have one small co-ed, why we don't just have one all-girl, and have one Division 1. To me, it doesn't make a lot of logical sense. Because if you make the argument, well, it's school size, well, in college you have the ability to recruit people. And Morehead and West Georgia would be competitive. And hardly anybody beats these guys, okay? Last year, Eastern Kentucky won small co-ed, but it's Morehead's first run at it. But they did beat them, But if Morehead hits, it wasn't the case. And now you got West Georgia in the conversation. So now you got to hope one of these juggernauts drop. And an all girl, I mean, since the two, Moorhead and West Georgia, have been going against each other, I think one other time someone other than those two has won. And it's just because both of those teams had bad days or had bad moments. Going Division One. I mean, nobody beat West Georgia for like 8 years, and Moorhead ran their division for forever. Hardly ever lost. Rarely. Just when they made mistakes, and even sometimes when they made mistakes, they were just so far ahead of everybody. So to me, like I said, I think Moorhead and West Georgia could be competitive. If you want to flip them into that D1A division and let them compete against UCF and Alabama and USF and Kentucky, absolutely let that happen. I think it would be great. I don't think that there's any reason logistically that there's no argument that you can make to me that would make it make sense. Would these teams win all the time? No, but would they have a chance to win? Absolutely. Nobody would really dominate on either side of that. Same thing. Moorhead all girl, West Georgia all girl, Alabama all girl. You get what I'm hitting at here. And I just think it's too confusing. Going back and forth, I think that's one of the big things that hurts us as a sport is that we just have too many divisions. It's too complicated to understand. There's too many of these little subcategories. And I think that's one of the things that people talk about, and it hurts our legitimacy, is that there's too much. Is that we're too accommodating to these things. And I understand being fair. Like, I understand there being a small co-ed. I understand there being an all-girl, and I understand there being a large co-ed. And, if you wanted to, you could even break that all-girl down some if you wanted to. But obviously, and I'm fine with having the open divisions for the junior colleges. I think that that's fair as well. But, you can make the argument all you want, but it's just when you have teams like West Georgia and Moorhead, you don't have an argument anymore because they're competitive, and they'll be competitive against anybody. And they would jump at the chance if you offered it to them to do this. So just something to think about. But let's get back to Small Coed D1 before I get too crazy. West Georgia's Small Coed team apparently had a little rough go. They had a pyramid collapse right at the end of the routine. Great routine coming out of semis. They had a 93.2, and then they had a 3-point deduction for that pyramid, and it was a 90.2, which is pretty impressive. And then Moorhead State had a 92.4 raw with a 1-point deduction. Ended up coming out of semis with a 91.4. So they got a 1.2 advantage. My first thoughts when I saw these scores was obviously they favored West Georgia here. It was pretty obvious. I mean, they had 3 they had a big pyramid collapse. And obviously that's one thing. But that 3-point deduction is a big one. When things blow out like that, especially in a pyramid, and it gets dangerous, that's where they're really hitting you, because they changed the deductions a couple years ago. And I don't know 100% if I like it yet. I think they made it a little bit more lenient, and they left some things up to some being a little bit more subjective. We'll get into it. Here's going to be the interesting dynamic that we have here, is that West Georgia's co-ed team had 4 guys, and Moorhead State's team had 5. So when we're comparing these skills, obviously this is a co-ed division, and the co-ed stunts should be viewed of a certain manner. If you've got 5 guys on the floor and you're only doing 3 co-ed stunts, I think that's detrimental. But in this case, it's not really fair to punish West Georgia for only having 4 guys, because they did what they were supposed to do throughout the. Let's run it down. They have 6 front handspring pull-ups, 4 co-ed, 2 all-girl. That's going to be the trend for all that for West Georgia. Back handspring pull-up, rewind immediate lib, side sumi 111s. Very, very absolutely impressive routine. And when they came out there for finals, they delivered in a pretty big way. I mean, it was pretty good. I don't know if all the execution was quite as good as the day before, but it was pretty close. And then obviously they did not have the big pyramid meltdown at the end of the routine. They came out there, they had a really, really great performance, a really, really strong performance. And then Moorhead State came out the same. They had 6 reverse hand-in-hands, side pop through, 5 co-ed, 1 all-girl. 6 front handspring ups, 6 rewinds. This is a hard routine. And really, you really haven't seen a lot of that in this division. A definitive boost in difficulty across the board. The tumbling was good. I mean, they both had a pretty good mix of the tumbling. I think that they squared up with each other really, really well. I thought West Georgia's pyramids were a little bit better. And when we go to look at the stunts, this is what's hard for me to differentiate the two, is because it's the 4 guys versus the 5 guys. And I always kind of lean towards, because it's co-ed. But it's a little bit different here in the collegiate thing, because they're maxing out your numbers. So, like I said, you can't punish them for 4. Now, if Moorhead had 4 guys, then the expectation is only that they're only going to be able to do 4 co-ed stunts. So you have to keep that in mind, that these things are viewed as similar. They kept their chemistry pretty good. They didn't cheat any skills. Nobody had any kind of omitted skills or anything like that. Both of these teams came up there and did a really, really good job. It ended up being Moorhead State with a flat score of 94, and the University of West Georgia won with a flat score of 95.1. So this is about a 1.1 difference. Looking at it and going back and just looking what I have here, obviously that front handspring full up is a huge difference. That is a pretty super elite skill. They both did full ups. Moorhead did to platform stretch. West Georgia did to the immediate. The immediate's harder. Even though it's not a body position, spinning to one leg is a more difficult skill. They did their rewind to immediate, and Moorhead only did their rewind to a platform. So these little things like that are chipping away at any kind of advantage that you might have. Front handspring up versus front handspring full ups. Obviously that's where the advantage goes. So it was pretty easy to see, but obviously with what we're looking at here is that these were smidge better, smidge more difficult. And really that kind of carried the course throughout this whole routine. That's what I'm looking at. Now, obviously I don't have the score sheets, and I'm not evaluating the cheer. But, it's a little bit here in stunt difficulty, a little bit here. And these numbers had to be pretty similar, I would think. Just based on what I watched, I thought, West Georgia's opening stunt was a little bit rough. Those front handsprings were not 100% at the top. They weren't bad. It's not like they didn't look like they didn't have control of them. They had them in their hands. They're not walking all over the place. They're quick to get it back up. They're demonstrating that they're in control of their skills. Is it 100% perfect execution? No. But these guys have also been running off, 30 days of 2-a-days and travel and school and games and all that stuff. So, a little bit of leniency when 2 teams are looking pretty identical. But, man, this was a great competition. If this is what the Small Coed division is going to look like going forward, it's going to be intense. It's going to be very, very highly competitive. Especially, like Southeast Louisiana, if they can keep building and they can keep coming on, maybe we can get to the point where we have 3 highly competitive teams in that division. Hats off to both programs. It was absolutely outstanding. Going into this was the one that I felt the most comfortable about when I picked it the day before. I did feel comfortable that West Georgia, if they hit and took care of business, they would win. There was just so much from looking at the prelim scores that would really indicate that there was a huge divide, because these 2 teams would have stood out amongst the pack, absolutely, and that's what they did, and you could tell that the judges has kind of seen that and reflected that. And now let's move over to the all-girl D1 division. So I'm only going to break down these 2 teams because it was not close outside of Moorhead State and West Georgia. So in second place during the preliminary round was Moorhead State. They had a 90.7. They had a 1-point deduction to come out to an 89.7. And they missed right at the end of that outstanding routine, right at the end of it. Missed a little bit on a pyramid. West Georgia came out of prelims with a score of 95.2. And I'm just going to tell you this. When I looked at that, I was like, oh, buddy. That is a tremendous gap. 1-point lead in cheerleading is big. This is 4.5 points. This is a lot. And I understand that they had a mistake. But here's what happens sometimes. You're looking at a whole bunch of teams. And not everybody that you want to see is always close together. If West Georgia went early, I can't remember the exact order. But if someone like that went early, you could tend to score them a little bit lower to maybe give room in case you see something that's better or something that could potentially score higher. Because remember, this judging is going to be comparative. You're comparing them against other people. Or, initially you're going to compare them against the best of whatever you think it could be. But over the course of that competition, you're going to start to understand what the layout and what the field is. What might be a 9 in difficulty here may not be a 9 in difficulty against different kind of competition, if you catch what I'm saying. You're being compared. Pretty confident West Georgia went closer to the end. I mean, they had a hellacious score. 95.2 is insane. But, I can't argue with that because, when we look at what they did, man, 5 full twisting rewinds, 5 extended hand-to-hand down with full to feet, back double up to immediate libs, front handspring full ups. Insane pyramids, back handspring double up 111s. Just insane. And the execution on this first day was absurd. They were delivering, smacking. The term concrete feet applies to West Georgia all-girl. They plant their feet in the sand and they don't move. They don't buckle. They don't give. And this performance was 100% an example of that. And Morehead State all-girl was not no chump stain. They were, let's look at this, 5 back extension roll double-ups, which is insanely difficult. They also did 5 full twisting rewinds, 5 shotguns, 5 extended hand-in-hands with the front prop to an immediate arabesque. Stunt difficulty off the chain, as high as you'll see in any division, anywhere, period. These two teams were outstanding. I was a little questionable about this difference, though. I just didn't feel... I felt like 4.5 points was a little big. But like I said, I think I can justify that. And ultimately, I've said this before, the scores don't really matter. People get all kind of bent out of shape about these numbers. They really don't matter. What you're looking for mostly is the difference in the score. And like I said, I think I've reflected a lot of this difference of West Georgia probably went closer to the end. They got a really high score to make sure that they were in front. And then it was all ultimately going to be settled the next day in finals. Because what happens is after you get your scores, used to you would go and you draw a number or draw names out of a hat or whatever it was to get the performance order. They don't do that anymore. What they do now is they start at the bottom and they work their way back up to the top. So if you came in the last qualifying team out of prelims, you'll be the first team to go in finals. And if you came in first in prelims, then you'll be the last team to go. This makes the comparative judging significantly easier because you're comparing these teams back to back. I haven't seen some of these teams that, are just there or just hoping to have good performances. These are the top teams. And as you get closer to the end, so you don't really have to create that room. Stuff that's better. That higher scoring difficulty is coming. So it makes it a lot easier to spread your score sheet out a little bit better. You don't have to worry about saving room for certain things for this. You kind of know how it's all going to build. And then you have the difficulty scores from before. So a lot of this is more execution than it is anything when you're rolling that over. And finals was a dogfight in a lot of ways. So Morehead State University came in second place. 91.9 with a 1-point deduction for a 90.9. That was on, I can't be 100% sure where that deduction came from. I'm pretty confident that it came on the full twisting rewind on the far right corner. And then West Georgia ended up with a 94.6, and they had 2 points in deductions. And that led to them getting a 92.6. So they still ended up winning by 1.7. And I know West Georgia had a little bit of issue on one of the full defeat. And I'm not 100% sure if the other one came from the full twist and rewind or from like a little miss on a pyramid or not. Like I said, I haven't seen those score sheets, but I can see where it came. If you told me that they could get away with having 2 potential mistakes and beating them, even with a 1, I don't know. I felt like these teams were neck and neck. And I'm not discrediting anybody because listen, I'm going to tell you exactly what happens. Ultimately, these scores, like I said, they don't matter. I want you to hear me say that loud and clear. They ultimately don't matter. Because what was going to happen is as soon as this division was done, they were going to tally up the scores. And then they were going to go to the judge and be like, hey, this is who we got in first and this is who we got in second. Do you agree? And then if we need to have a conversation with each other, we'll all have a conversation with each other. And then we'll make the decision there. Which team did you think won? You've got your score sheets. You know what you're thinking. Just to make sure. Because, you don't ever want anybody to get out of control. I'm like, I got a little I got a little trigger happy on my section and created a gap that was a little bit too big for these other areas to overcome. You want to make sure that you're getting it right. So even though we're all judging our one section, there is a lot of communication that goes on between us. There is going to be an agreement. There's going to be a unanimous decision that's going to be reached. And in the event that that doesn't happen, obviously there's a head judge that can overrule it if they feel it necessary within a certain extent. And obviously my assumption here is that they all got together and they had a communication with each other. Do I think that they were 1.7 points better? No, I don't. I think that's too big. But I mean, when we look back here at the scores, a 91.9 versus a 90.7 coming from prelims to finals, it's pretty close to the same. And obviously West Georgia's was a little bit down. They had the deductions, and then on top of that, their execution would have gotten hit for making those mistakes. So you will get hit with the deductions, and then you're also really going to get hammered on execution. And that's going to be something that we're really going to talk about later when you look at these. You get hit with the deductions, but your raw score is going to suffer because your raw score includes your execution. And if you have mistakes, you're not executing at a high level. That's why sometimes even when these teams hit, it's not just the difference in these deductions. You can't make the assumption that they were going to be perfect. That's not how it works. You can only judge what you see. So in my opinion, like I said, I think that these teams, ultimately the judges sat down and they made the decision that they thought, West Georgia, I do feel like overall had the harder routine. But it wasn't like, these teams were close. This was nasty. Like I went into this kind of going back and forth who I thought, just based on what I saw. I wasn't really very firmly set in it, but at the end of the day, West Georgia gets the win, and it was an absolutely outstanding routine, an absolutely outstanding performance from both squads. Like I said, I felt like it could have gone either way. I'm not disappointed in that result one bit. I feel like it was very deserving. Both of these teams deserve to walk away as champions, but ultimately only one can. And if, like I said, if this had been the D1A division and you'd flip them over there, it'd be a very interesting conversation to have. That's all that I'm saying. And now let's go over to the Division 1 and continue this battle of West Georgia and Morehead State. There were two other teams in this division. I think they were from Puerto Rico that made it to finals. There were some other teams. I don't remember who they were. At this point, like I said, I've pretty much dialed into, I know who's going to be at the top. I mean, there was a huge gap difference. I think it was 16 points in finals between second place and the two other teams. So, I mean, it's not close. And we had Morehead State coming out of prelims. They were in second place with a 90.2. They had 3 points in deductions, and that brought them down to an 87.2. And I believe all 3 of those were stunt drops. And then West Georgia had a 92.8, and they had no deductions. That West Georgia performance was phenomenal in Division 1 Coed. Absolutely outstanding. I highly recommend that you go back and watch. Morehead looked a little rough. They looked a little sluggish, and they had a bad performance. But this was not a drastically huge difference considering the amount of mistakes that took place. A 90.2 to a 92.8. I mean, the deductions obviously create that gap that looks a little bit more intimidating, but it's 5.6. Well, if you get the 3 back, then the question becomes, can you cover 2.6 points in execution? And I mean, when it's 3 stunt mistakes, 3 of the same category, it's not that unreasonable to think that you can overcome that. And that's pretty close to what happened. Let's break down this West Georgia routine that was absurd here. Because in finals, Morehead scored 92. And West Georgia scored 92.2. 0.2 of a point. And that is scary close. The judges sat down after these performances, and they had to have the conversation. Who do you think won? Absolutely, it had to happen. It's too close. You didn't just randomly get here, okay? So let's look at this. We had West Georgia come out with 6 full twisting rewinds. I don't think you've seen a co-ed team compete those at UCA. Team USA is the only other team that I know of. So 6 full twisting rewinds, 6 hand skis to QP, 8 front handspring pull-ups. And to me, this was a difference maker right here. They did 8 of what you would consider like super elite top tier skills. That front handspring full up is not an easy skill to do. I mean, compared to what they did do, I mean, it's probably the easiest thing that they did. But that 8 number really stood out because at no point in time did Moorhead do 8 of a super elite skill. They had 3 double up 111s and they shotgunned from the leg. That is extremely difficult. 9 full up immediates, and the last pyramid was just absolutely insane. Back handspring tucked through. I mean, it was absurdly hard. The last pyramid cinematic. I mean, this whole routine was absolute godsend. It was phenomenal. The prelim performance was amazing, but when we get into the finals performance, it was a little bit rougher. So, the full twist and rewinds were pretty solid. I mean, none of them really caught at the top, but I mean, it's a full twist and rewind. It's insanely freaking hard. The hand skis, man. They touched one, and one dude, man, it hit him right at the chest. And I don't know. I understand, based on the rules, that that's not a deduction. But how you can pop that through and hold on to her ankles at your chest and not get called for something, I don't understand that. And maybe they just thought West Georgia was significantly better. But I definitely didn't understand how that wasn't something. And, under the old deduction rules, that would have been a bobble, for sure. In my opinion, if those feet dropped below chest level, you dropped it. That's my opinion. I don't care how many people are touching it. I don't care what the intention was. I'm looking around. I know what everybody's doing. I'm not an idiot. I watched the first time around. I don't know how they didn't get flagged for that. Just to be completely honest with you. The new deduction system I'm not 100% in favor of because it leaves it up to the judge to determine what that value is in your stunt execution versus before that would have been a bobble. So you would have gotten hit on the execution for a bobble, absolutely. But you would have gotten an additional 1-point deduction. Now, it's not just exclusive to them. There were things on both sides of the fence that I thought before with the old deduction system you would have called these. So I'm not super big fan of this. I understand that it was a little bit more complicated before, but to just allow something like that to go untapped. And I understand that they got hit in execution, but to me, that was a deductionable offense. And Moorhead had their issues as well. But once again, this is another insanely hard routine. 6 back handspring double ups, 6 side sumis, 6 just toss double ups. 3 guys ended up jumping in to do like low full rounds. They did 4 side sumi front shotgun pyramids. The 9 toss libs at the end, I thought that was a point where, like, if I was going to try to compare these teams and find where's that niche at, because, like I said, we had the issue with that hand ski. There was one of these back dubs that I thought was a little bit on that. I would have flagged that as well. So, like, I'm not going to harp real bad about them not calling that deduction on either one of them because they missed it for both of them, and I think it would have had the equal impact. If you add the deduction, it would have amounted the same. So ultimately, I'm complaining about nothing. But at some point down the line, that's going to be an issue. Somewhere down the line. 6 back handspring double ups versus 6 full twist and rewinds. I've never done either one of them. I imagine that they're both super extremely hard, considering the amount of people that we haven't seen do them. Okay? You've got the hand skis versus the side semis. Once again, another 2 extremely difficult skills. Numbers are very, very similar. It's hard to argue which one of these is 100% harder. But the 8 front handspring full-ups, that was a little hard to overcome. Because you did the 6 double-ups, and would the double-up be considered harder? Probably, because you get the 2 rotations. But then the front handspring full-up's got an inversion and a 1.5 spin. But the 8 ultimately is going to beat the 6. If it was ever a debate in your mind, the 8 is going to beat out the 6. I understand they threw some other things and jumped in, but that, a low full round is not in the ballpark of that difficulty. It's just not. And to me, that was a big spot where I thought West Georgia could pull ahead in stunts. And then the 9 toss libs that Moorhead did versus the 9 full-up immediate libs that West Georgia did. There's a definitive difference in the difficulty in a full-up and a straight-up toss. So, in my opinion, like I said, without seeing score sheets, I would assume that West Georgia won stunt difficulty. If they won execution or not, I have no idea. But they for sure won stunt difficulty. And I would go as far as to say that they probably won pyramid difficulty as well. I'm not saying that they blew them out of the water, but I'm saying there's enough for me to create a definitive friction where I would sit there and be like, I could see why you would say they won this. So at the very least, this is a point one. This is a point one. Both the cheers are great. I think West Georgia's cheers better. It's a little bit more crowd engaging. But Moorhead's got a good cheer. It's not like it's bad. It's not like it's terrible. It's got tradition. Same thing with West Georgia. I just think West Georgia's cheer is a little bit better. The tumbling for both is about the same. They had a pretty equivalent number of fools. I don't know if Moorhead State could have done those stunts that West Georgia did based on what I'm comparing them to. Based on what you... Now, I have no idea if that's true or not at all. I'm only judging on what you present to me. But what you've presented to me is that West Georgia stunts were harder and that they were doing numbers that you couldn't duplicate. I'm sure that's something that they'll look at and they'll discuss. And, I'm not knocking. I know Moorhead State went through a lot of injuries. I had Jacob that was there, and he was on this team, and he had gotten hurt with a back injury. So I know they were going through a lot. Like I said, I'm not being judgmental. I'm just breaking down what I saw. And, of course, Max, one of my boys, he was on West Georgia. Super, super proud of him. Super happy to see him win another national championship. I think this is his 6th. So he's off to. He might be getting ready to wrap it up. I'm not sure. I'm sure we're gonna have a conversation about that. But man, and he had a great performance and partner stunt on Friday night. Got 3rd. Hit a great, really, really difficult routine. Man, just and like I said, ultimately this leads to West Georgia getting a clean sweep in those 3 divisions, which is not something that I think I would have predicted going into this weekend. It's hard to think that no matter how good you are, when you're competing against this high level, to think that something like that would happen, especially when you think back to all 6 of these teams hit and head to head. I mean, it was extremely impressive competition. I highly recommend you watch any one of these routines. They're outstanding. They're fantastic. It's some of the best cheerleading that you'll ever see around. I'm just trying to break it down and make sense so people can look at this and be like, hey, why'd you think this? Why'd you think that? Just having conversation. And I'm open to anybody that wants to rebuttal that. I don't have a problem. Like I said, I don't have the score sheets. I'm just judging on what I saw. And I was not a judge for this competition. I'm just basing off my knowledge, skills I've done, my history of judging, and how I'm looking to create differences in score sheets. And this would be an example. And let's move to the Big Daddy one, the Division 1A. And boy, was prelims pretty interesting. Starting from semis, we had... In 7th place was the University of Kentucky. They had a little bit of a rough go. Pyramid fall, stunt drop. They had a raw score of 91. They had 2 points in deductions, brought them down to an 89. Oklahoma with a raw score of 90.1, no deductions. Tennessee with a 92.7. 1 deduction led them down to a 91.7. We had a tie in 3rd place. We had Western Kentucky with a 91.9. Bama had a 91.9 after a 1-point deduction. And we had a tie for 1st place. Which the only reason they let that slide is because this was prelims. If this had been finals, it would have been a different outcome. USF had a 94.8. They had a 1-point deduction to bring them to a 93.8. And UCF had a 93.8. Now, if this had been finals, UCF would have won. Because in the event that you have a tie like that, you go to the deductions. And if whoever has the most deductions falls down. So UCF would have won. But, these scores are, like I said, it kind of goes back to what I say. There's a lot of teams in this division. There's a lot of good. There's a lot of bad. There's a lot of, you go through really big gaps between seeing these and that. And, some teams had some rough goes. These performances were not super clean, nothing like what it was going to be today. Nothing like what it was on Sunday. Boy, let me tell you something. Let's talk for a second about how this is going to break down. Now, I'm only going to cover the top 5 teams going into finals. So UCF falls from 1st place to 5th place. They scored an 89.5, and they got beat out by Oklahoma, who had an 89.6. Now, you're probably wondering, how did they fall from 93.8 to an 89.5? They had that full up on the far right side. It was full up immediate, came down to his chest. Looks like he pops it off. That definitely hurt the stunt execution. But when you break down what really took place in this routine, they had the back extension roll full up. They had a rewind. the difficulty is not super insane, not compared to what it is at the top of this. Oklahoma was pretty similar range of difficulty. Now, what was the difference here? UCF went a lot closer to the end the day before, and they're in Florida, so the crowd's going to go crazy for them. And they hit their routine pretty well on Saturday. But when you look at it, that full up is probably what knocked UCF in fifth. I would have thought that they would have been fourth. But when you look at that execution, that's for sure what hurt them. These teams did better than they did the day before. Their difficulty was significantly better. Their execution was way better than it was the day before. And all of a sudden it made UCF's execution and UCF's performance not look as good. They still had a great performance, nothing that I would be disappointed or ashamed of, but obviously it was a step down from what it was the day before, and everybody else seemed to step up. Oklahoma performed around the same level. I thought their score ultimately went down because a lot of other teams did better. But let's talk about how the University of Kentucky decided to come along and throw a wrench into every single thing that happened this day. What University of Kentucky did changed the perception of that whole competition. This is a team that has struggled for the last few years. That was one of the richest dynasties in all of cheerleading. And they've had a rough go the last several years. I mean, they haven't won since 2019. Performance haven't hit since 2019. The University of Kentucky comes out seventh. The third, I think they were the third team to go. And they absolutely hit this routine. I mean, smoked it. The crowd is absolutely going crazy because it's been a long time since we've seen Kentucky beat Kentucky. I understand what this performance had to mean to these adults and what they've had to go through. And I'm talking about it now, but I know that they've heard it too. This is not Kentucky anymore. This was Kentucky again. To me, this was the point where they can change everything. Because now you can sit here and say, these were my people that I recruited, that I brought in, that brought into my message, and now we're changing things. Everybody, this is what's going to happen if you buy into what we're doing here at the University of Kentucky. Was this everything that Kentucky used to be? Was it all the boom, the creativity, and stuff that we've never seen before? No. But these were exceptionally high-level skills, and the way that they performed them was exceptional. This, to me, is going to be the changing point for the University of Kentucky. It 100% can be. And they may walk away disappointed that they didn't get a championship. I don't know. But this performance has reinvigorated. And I think the world needs the University of Kentucky to be great again. And believe me, this was a message loud and clear that the University of Kentucky is not going anywhere. 100% the kind of performance that you can build off of and kind of reawaken this idea that, they weren't that far away from being right back to where they used to be. And after all this struggle, I think people are dying to finally see it. I think that for us being Kentucky fans that have been here our whole lives and have known Kentucky to be a dominant program, to see this kind of performance and to understand what can potentially come from that, it's the most exciting time in cheerleading. I'm very excited to see what they're going to do going forward. So they opened up with those 6 front handspring pull-ups. They did 6 back handspring pull-ups with one in the middle doing just a straight up back handspring up. They had the full up immediate libs. They did 9 of those. Pyramids were great. They had the full twisting shotguns to 111s, the 4 front handspring up structures. Those were gorgeous. I mean, these things are landing in the pocket. Like I said, the execution is insane. The whole place is going bananas because we're seeing Kentucky beat Kentucky again. Cats, everybody does the Cats cheer. CATS, cats. Everybody loves that, eats it up. And this was a great performance. Great routine, great routine. What I think hurt them the most and probably kept them from being higher up on this card was the lack of some of the creativity. Did they do anything ultimately that we've never seen before? We've seen the full twisting the full twisting shotguns onto the 111s. Kentucky's done them before. The front handspring pull-ups, the back handspring pull-ups. These are super, super hard skills, but they're not accustomed to the groundbreaking Kentucky or what some of these other top teams did. And I think the creative difference is probably what ultimately sealed the deal to keep them out of doing any higher than third. But that's just because the 2 teams after them were absolutely exceptional. And it was hard to beat that. I mean, the execution of the other 2 teams was just as good. The difficulty was, maybe a little bit more in some areas. But like I said, ultimately, this is a great routine. Nothing to be disappointed in or ashamed of. And then we're going to the University of South Florida has come in second, and they scored 94.6, pretty close to what they did the day before. The execution, man, was money on that first stunt. That front prop to immediate lib was smacking. They did a really, really good job throughout their whole routine. They did the three shotgun 111s with the girl, shotgun from the mid layer. Man, those are rock solid too. Nobody gave, nobody budged. This is a fantastic routine. I imagine that Kentucky probably beat USF in tumbling, but the stunning edge is kind of back and forth, So we're comparing like the front pops. Well, USF's went to immediates and Kentucky's went to a platform. So that's easy to see where the advantage should be. The immediate libs, they both did that, so that's kind of a scratch. And then you're looking at, is the front handspring full up harder than the front handspring up? Yes. So I think Kentucky possibly beat them in stunt difficulty. I felt like it was definitely the things that pyramid difference is probably, in my opinion, looking at that, what made the huge gap, because it was a significant difference as far as not just the difficulty, but the creativity, how it flows into that overall. Obviously, I have a boy, Brandon, that was at South Florida. I have one boy, Hunter, that was at the University of Kentucky. Super proud of both of them and how they did. Very, very great performances. They have a lot to be proud of. Brandon did partner stunt on Friday. He had a great performance there. One mistake right at the end. But, man, let me tell you something. What these guys have done have been outstanding. And then it comes here to our champion, which was the University of Alabama, scoring a 94.8, almost a 2-point bump from their prelims, and they came out the gate. The extended hand-to-hand split to full defeat was gorgeous. These were money. And this is not easy. Let me reiterate that to you. It looked easy, but there ain't nothing easy about that. You'd be hard-pressed to find a lot of people that could put 6 of those on the floor. And then another thing that I thought really stood out for them, they did the 7 front handspring full-ups. 7 of an elite skill. I didn't see the other teams do 7 of anything that was in that super elite category. They were pushing it with 6. But 7 of the front handspring full-ups I thought was a really, really big deal. I thought that they had the tumbling that could match the University of Kentucky, so that would have, if Kentucky would have beat out South Florida in tumbling, they weren't going to beat out Alabama. And then Alabama has got the difficulty. They've got the full to the feet, which is harder than the front pops. The front handspring full-ups, which are harder than the front handsprings. And, they did one more front handspring full-up than Kentucky. They had a little trouble on one full-up. They did a full-up, 9 of them. Full-up platform. Pull opposite tick stretch. And, man, he probably traveled like a panel mat and a half. But, it was falling. You can't fool me. I watched that. That thing was coming down. But that girl spun, and that guy kept his eyes on, and he didn't break contract. He did not back down from that. He saw it going. She committed to the spin. He did what he was supposed to do. He caught her. They made it look clean. It was very controlled. Very, very great awareness. And sometimes those things make a difference. And ultimately here, it made a huge difference, because 1 second of not paying attention right there, and that's a drop. You would have fallen to 3rd place for sure. 1 mistake right there. But, they handled it with grace, man. And outstanding pyramids, beautiful creativity. The roll tide is always big. Man, this was a phenomenal performance. Absolutely phenomenal. Nothing, man, across the board. The top 5 teams did not have any deductions. So, it's very rare that we get to see something like that, where we have this many teams competing at that high of a caliber. This is a 0.2 difference between them and USF. So ultimately what they decided is they had to sit down together, and they're like, this team is just a little bit better. Like, that's how close this was. 1 point deciding 3rd and 1st. A deduction, an opinion. Ultimately, do I feel pretty comfortable that they got all this right? Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And I want to send a shout out right now to Noah, who's on the University of Alabama. He's another kid that I coached. Just won his first collegiate national championship. He was not on the mat, but he was on the mat last year. I know he goes through all this stuff. The kids worked really, really hard. Super, super proud of him. I've been reaching out to him already to see about him coming on and sitting down and having a conversation with me about the season, nationals, all this stuff. And hopefully we can get together and put something together with that. But man, the caliber and the quality across the board at this nationals, like I said, I mean, we're looking at, I reviewed the Open. Sheldon and Iowa Western both hit. Small Coed, all girl, and Division I Coed, all those D1s. Morehead State and West Georgia all hit. And then you had Southeastern Louisiana that also hit in the Small Coed. And then the top 5 teams all hit 0. This is good cheerleading. A few years ago they changed the rules and they allowed them to put more people on the floor. And I think that at first it was a little bit rough for some teams. We had some rough years because you're adjusting to having more numbers on the floor. You have to recruit more. You have to bring in more people. And you really have to push the idea of doing these numbers because other people are going to. So if you don't, it's going to look bad on you. And I think that now people are really starting to get in their groove. They're really starting to get comfortable. You're really starting to see them integrate these numbers well. The quality of cheerleading in high school has gone up so much, and varsity has engineered all that. We'll have a big conversation about that one day, about how they implemented these rule changes, what they've done with they were mandatory, the UCA camps that they would make us go to during the summer to give you accreditation to teach you skills, the college involvement, reaching out to high schools and helping to grow. As they've expanded high school cheerleading, they've produced people that are more able to walk in and be effective in collegiate routines. And with the increase in numbers, these bigger co-ed divisions, you can see the significance, adding one more guy to small co-ed. And, you may say, well, it's just one person or it's just 1 or 2 people here and there. But it's an entire another stunt group. And the difference between putting up one number sometimes can be a huge difference. But you're really starting to see that pay off. You're really starting to see the difficulty because it's the competitiveness in practice is higher. The competition amongst your teammates is more cutthroat. Because everybody's fighting to get these opportunities. And how do you get that? You get that by being better, by working and grinding. So the competition, like I said, it's constant. It's all the way throughout. But man, what a phenomenal year it was at Nationals. I'm very excited for, high school nationals and what's going to come up with that. This is the last year that they're all going to be there together because in the future I think they're supposed to be splitting it to where the Division I, the Division II teams will be coming on separate weekends. I'm not crazy about that. I love having weekends of sitting down and cheer, but I would rather be there, and trying to make 3 trips to Florida for college nationals and 2 high school nationals just does not seem realistic to me. Lots of great performances across the board. So many people that I could talk about, but I'm just talking about the top of the card, looking about how some of these things probably broke down. In baskets, we didn't talk enough about baskets. Baskets are so insane, and they are big parts of college score sheets. Some of the most unbelievable difficulty that we've ever seen. And maybe we're not going to see it again, but to me, I thought, man, this was a game changer. So I hope that you guys all enjoyed that. I hope that you enjoyed my breakdown. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I know that when high school nationals comes around, we'll do that again on what I can watch. It's just hard for me to watch everything. And if I don't see it with my own eyes and hear the audio and hear the music and hear the crowd, I don't really want to venture out and give my opinion on it too much because unless I got the full picture, it's already hard enough watching on TV without being there in person. So I don't really want to stray that at all. But absolutely, I've got some other episodes in the can already. I just need to edit them and cut them. I do plan to get back on my timeline and cover my years coaching at Graves County, get into my McCracken stuff and how I got there and kind of how all that expanded because there is a big tonal shift in who I am as a person, who I am as a coach when I make the switch. And at that point, we'll be able to get some more of my boys in to sit down and talk. I've got several people, some people that I coached before, some people that I've just known before to come in and talk about what their experiences are, what they go through, and kind of get that mentality and stuff out there, pains and struggles that people had to go through. There's a whole lot more stuff that we're going to talk about, and I'm very excited, especially now that TikTok is being reinstated, at least for a little bit, so I can keep promoting this. Please, if you enjoy my content, please like it, share it, subscribe to me here on my YouTube channel. Tell your friends. Ultimately, I don't really want to get rich. I'm not really trying to make this like my living or my full-time job because at some point I am going to run out of stuff to talk about. It's just the way that it is. The cheerleading world is not booming 24/7, but I would like to be able to reach out and help people and talk about stuff like this, talk about score sheets, talk about perceptions, talk about the differences that we notice, and talk about the struggles that we go through, letting people know that they're not alone in the way that they feel or the way that they go through, or that problems that you go through are not just exclusive to you. Everybody goes through a lot of different things. We all go through a lot of different struggles, because that's the price that we have to pay for cheerleading, and it's a heavy price sometimes. But then you get to weekends like this where you get to see some incredible action. I walked away with two boys walking away with national championships. I had several place really, really high, second place, third place. Absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. I'm super proud. A lot of them are going to continue to have great futures. A couple of them might be getting ready to wrap it up. And then I've got a few more that are in high school now that are going to be getting a chance to go out there in that collegiate world here pretty soon. So I'm very excited about what the future holds, obviously, for cheerleading and for this podcast. So I won't keep you guys any longer. I will see you guys next week. So stay tuned to Memoirs of the Father.